Tracks door out. Okay.
All right, so everybody right down the middle. Make sure you stay open just a little bit. You're fine, Kim. You're out of the shot.
Jen, am I good? Thank you. We're good? We're live? Back my head.
Live, so
Hello, Zoomers.
we'll put you right here, so you're in the middle.
Okay.
Oh, I know, right?
There we go. Make sure and you have materials in the back.
Yep. Everybody.
2 stacks, one from each stack.
There's 2 things for you.
Yeah. That's, I just. Somebody's got to. Might as well.
So.
Okay.
I was excited for you.
So was I. So you're gonna hang at the office?
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Sound like this. So, material,
It's a lot of material, but it's a subject that requires a lot of material. Because it's a big subject.
Yeah, Paul's under. He's.
It's one of Trek's little hot buttons.
I don't want to get, look at it, I don't know anybody. Yeah, it's fun, a lot of agents here don't do. Big guy? Yeah, okay, and then, but you know, you're like Tessie. You know, this.
Don't care about what he was.
Big thing.
Well, Lincoln, from this angle, that above your head, it looks like you're in a helicopter or an airplane. That's a pretty cool picture. I love that. Thanks, Colin. Okay. Have materials? Okay.
Yes.
And as I talked about in my email, we'll talk about several subjects, several topics. Did someone bring the good stuff up here? Did you want to come and talk to us again, young lady?
Again.
Have you been, it's been what, at least a couple of weeks since we've seen you. Have you missed us? Come on out.
Be known as popcorn lady. If I keep on-
Well, we love that. That's a good thing.
Cupcakes, but the place that I try to get them apparently is only closed on Monday, so.
Okay, everybody, just give their attention to our sponsor person.
I won't take long, I promise. I'm Caitlin. I am with Home Pro Roofing and Restoration. I don't know who was here last time and who wasn't. It was a couple of weeks ago. So we kind of offer a little bit of everything. Last time I did not have a handy dandy flyer to give you guys, to give you a little bit more information, but just a general kind of overview. Really and truly, we've been open for a few years now, but we've got a little over 20 years experience combined with everybody. And we're just trying to get out there and see what we can do for you guys. Anything from inspections to repairs. I know y'all probably have a lot of homeowners that need that last minute inspection to get everything approved and done.
Yep.
Whether they're buying or selling. So
Yep.
if you need somebody, give us a call. We've got somebody in every area. Even if it boils down to it, I can do it myself. So.
And have your information on there?
I will, did they put it on? It's at the bottom, that 877 number at the bottom will reach me because I just had them switch that over. But I have a stack of cards I'm gonna leave as well with my personal.
Okay, perfect. We greatly appreciate you being here.
Of course.
Yeah, put some, maybe some cards. You can have one and put some more back by the sign-in sheet. That'd be good. Perfect.
Oh, enjoy your class.
Well, I'm going to enjoy the class because anytime I'm in a room for realtors, that's a good day. So we're especially KW realtors, so we love that.
Y'all seem like you're always having a good time.
We
So
are having a good time.
thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Caitlin. We appreciate it very much. Absolutely. So it's what we do in our classes. In talking, in addition to talking about contracts and things of that nature. We really try to touch on things that our agents are dealing with on a regular basis, things that happen on over and over and over again. Sometimes you will find yourself saying, Bob, is Bob going to talk about that again? The reason he does is because we haven't got it right yet. Still have a challenge, still have a problem. Now, advertising is a pretty cyclical thing. You know, Trek goes through their cycles of things they really like to emphasize. And they're going through a cycle right now with a couple of things. I'm on one of Trek's committees, the Broker Responsible Work Group. And we interact with both ESAC committee, the Education Standards Advisory Committee, and the Trek created a new, actually the legislature did it, the Brokerage committee did it, and the commissioners appointed it. It's called the Unauthorized Practice of Law Working Group. And it addressed that specific area that agents keep doing things that technically are unauthorized practice of law. We've talked about that in previous classes. How are we doing temperature wise? We good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Are you?
Okay. But it's so far, because I'm kind of cold, but that's okay. I want you to be happy, not ecstatic, but happy. And so Trek created that group was created because of things we keep doing on a regular basis. And we've talked about this in some classes. And it's as simple as sometimes putting things in special provisions, which we've learned to avoid doing anything in special provisions of the contract. And we've gotten really good at what? Don't touch that. But then in the amendment to the contract, in item number 9, we begin to stick things in there. Or we put language in paragraph 2 where we deal with repairs in the amendment. We got language in there that we shouldn't be using. We have sometimes things in listing agreement that we do it. Now, one of the things about a listing agreement and buyer rep agreement, those are not Trek forms. Those are Texas Realtor forms. And because we are principals in those forms, if you've got somebody that needs to change some things in there, we can make those changes because we're principal. And so if you've got a seller who says, you know, I kind of want to make a change here and there, send it to me, we'll look at it, we'll go through the process. And we have the legal authority to do that because we're one of the parties. So that gives we're not one of the parties to the contracts, which is why we can't do anything with those. So, you know, Trek's going through that and dealing with the challenge of things that we'd like to put in the contract, we shouldn't be putting in them or in the offer. And one of the things that Trek has made very clear, they don't care who originated the language. Both agents are responsible. If they let their client sign off on it, it's just as if they originated. So they're both responsible. We need to really be on board with that. So as they went through that cycle, Trek did a whole new set of advertising rules. And actually in 2018, as when it really became effective, and it talked about that here. We're going to talk about some of the basic concepts of Trek's concern with advertising. But we're going through that cycle again. And the way Trek becomes aware of advertising violations is someone files a complaint with Trek saying that such and such brokerage is doing something they shouldn't be doing. They first came out with the information about brokerage services form. And we went through some revisions, and I was on the committee that worked on those revisions. We went through a period where we had a lot of complaints, and unfortunately, they originally just went to us as opposed to going directly to Trek about the information about brokerage services form that either wasn't presented in a timely manner or wasn't completed out correctly. You're required to have the information about brokerage service form and the consumer protection notice, and you're required to have that in that first situation where you interact with someone. You're not required to have it in your email all the time, although that's probably safe to do that. Because if you've got an ongoing client, you've already given it to them. They've already initialed off, you already have that. But if you didn't have it at the beginning, then you need to make sure they do end up with it. And so we had a lot of people who I think otherwise have no life. And you're looking for just little things. If you're looking for, you didn't present in a timely manner or it's not entirely complete. Because one of the littlest things that would happen at the beginning when we would remind our agents, you need to have on your websites, you need to have that information about brokerage services form. And so you need to make sure that you have that there. And ironically, the way some people felt like they were complying by doing it is they would send us a copy of it, or they'd have it on there, or they'd link to it, and it'd be blank. We simply didn't say, we need for you to have that completed information about brokerage service form. You would think, I just don't need a blank form. Then go to Trek for a blank form. So I had to do that. So we went through a little bit of that cycle where people would say, hey, here's what we really mean by that. And we kind of work through that. But we kind of moved past that cycle. We don't have as much of that anymore. What we really have are the advertising issues where people are advertising and they're not including all the correct information. One of the things we've got in this big thing here, we'll look at in a little bit, is we've got some examples of ads that are in compliance and ads that are not in compliance. And we'll look at how some of those go. So as Trek went through the process in May of 2018, went through and creating these new requirements. And Texas Realtors, Texas Association of Realtors at the time, had they actually set up a committee, a task force to deal with the advertising rules. And Jan Fight Miller, she and her brother on C21, Judge Fight, was the chair of that. And I was happy to serve on the committee. And we looked at all those. We looked at all the rules and all the situations, made a lot of suggestions to Trek on how to deal with this. And we went from the original proposals going to Trek for advertising. One of the first things that people were saying, well, we need to do like a number of other trade groups. You notice what some of the other trade groups have? Their license number. You'll see on the side of the truck, transportation, you'll see your license number. You'll see plumbers, like you have a license number. So they say, well, you're a trade group just like all the rest of them. And we said, oh, that's not, we're different than that. We don't want to in any way minimize the value of trade groups, but we don't feel like we need to have a license number because the original suggestion was in all of our advertising, we had to have a license number. And we kind of battled that in the advertising task force, fought it, and through our influence at Texas State Realtors with legislators, we were able to knock that down and we didn't have to do that. That probably is okay, although as I look out and I see advertising out there, sometimes it's a real struggle to figure out who they are and who they're with. And unfortunately, sometimes that's one of us. And so if all you have was your license number in there, that'd be pretty simple to look up with it. very quickly, we could tell who you are, who you're sponsored by, who's responsible for you, and who we need to talk to if we've got a problem with you. I haven't heard any rumblings that that's back on the radar. We're considering doing it. But as Trek looked through the situation, they went around the state and had some town hall meetings. And one of them was here in our area, in fact, it was at the County Association of Realtors. And they did a town hall meeting, it was full house. And we talked about all of the things that they're concerned with. And Douglas Olmixon, who at the time was the executive director for Trek, was from Trek, was what it got to do it and talk about it. And they were going through the process of explaining what Trek's concerns are in advertising. And I want to get some interaction from you here, including our fine consumer folks who I see up there, and I can see some of the names, but some of the people I don't have a picture. Or I just have a picture. I don't have to see the live person in there. But when Trek is concerned with advertising, remembering who Trek is, the primary consumer agency created to protect the consumer in real estate transactions. So that's their primary duty. Now, they also have kind of a side duty to protect brokers from competent and corrupt other brokers. So that's kind of their side thing. But their primary reason is for the consumer. And so as they're looking to advertise the consumer, what do you think their concern is as we advertise? What are they concerned that what we might do in our advertising? Any ideas? What are they looking for?
Provide false information.
False information. Certainly, if you're providing false information, now give me an example of what false information might be.
Like saying you can offer a rebate or some financial thing that you're not.
Sure, the devil's in the details. Yeah, work through that. So one, you're clearly providing incorrect, false information. And remember, your primary purpose in all your advertising is what? When you advertise, why are you advertising?
I just want to know who you are.
Yeah, show people who you are and you want to generate business. I mean, that's why you're advertising, right? So while you're doing that, Trek says it needs to be correct, it needs to be not misleading. One of the interesting things about false information, if let's say your team, maybe your husband and wife team, both of you are not licensed. Maybe he's not licensed and maybe she's not licensed, but one of you, and you see in all your stuff, picture of both of them. Well, Trek says you may be representing, you may be implying to the public that both of you are real estate licensees, and you're not. So you'd have to clarify someone else when you see a team and saying, here are our team members. You need to make sure people don't look and think all those team members are people who are licensed. Sometimes you may have people on your team who are not licensed, and you need to make sure the correct information goes out to the public. So that could be an example of false information. So what else besides false information that Trek might be concerned with in our advertising? What do you think?
One of the brokerage.
But we need to make sure it follows the rules of size. And one of the things that we'll learn is that the broker's information needs to be at least half the size of the largest contact information. So you need to make sure that that's correct, because Trek wants people to be able to see that. And so it is. And if you got this little, 4 font and 20 font, people may totally miss it. What else might Trek be concerned with in your advertising?
Truth in advertising, as far as.
So
making
truth in
promises.
advertising, Holly says, what does that mean?
Well, making promises you can't, I guarantee I can help you buy a home, or giving out guarantees.
Guaranteed savings, for example, we went through this when buyer representation first came out, where buyer's agents, would guarantee savings by using me. I'm working on your behalf. I'm going to get you a better price. I'm going to negotiate a better deal. And at some point in time, Trek said, some things are okay, but guarantees, you can't do that. which you can't guarantee. And it ends up in all kinds of complaints and troubles and things like that. So making those kinds of guarantees, whatever. What else?
Well, it must include the name of the broker.
Do what?
It must include the
We
name.
have to have the name of the broker, at least half the size of the largest contact information. And we're going to talk in a minute about what that means, the name of the broker. By the way, why does that need to be there?
To show who the broker is, and it's not you as the agent, for one thing, too.
Why is that important? Why is it important for that consumer to see who the broker is? Why is that important?
That's for doing business property.
Well, technically, yeah, but they don't have a clue who the broker is. They don't know the name of the broker. There's a DBA there. They don't have a clue. They'll never meet the broker. They don't know who the broker is. And they're not interested in the fact that technically all clients are clients of the broker. They don't care about that. Why do they need the name of the broker?
Did they complain to?
Yeah, who they complain to? If you screw up, who is responsible for you? It's the broker.
Like he said, all commissions fees are at the broker level.
Yeah, everything's broker level. So Trek says, we want the consumer, if they've got a problem with a particular agent, a license holder, they need to know who's responsible for that license holder. That's why as we revised the information about broker services form, we've got all that information on there. So they say, yeah, that's the case. So they need to know. Trek says, if anybody's got a, now, it hasn't turned out to be as helpful as you would think it could be. Because, for example, you don't have to put the broker's name. We don't have to put Mike Brody in there or Bob Baker in there. We can put Keller Williams in there because as we'll find, we look at one of our sheets in here, that's a DBA. I mean, literally, Keller Williams Realty is a DBA for this office. So when somebody's looking at your advertising, they say, okay, it's Keller Williams Realty. So Keller Williams Realty is responsible for that agent. Which Keller Williams Realty? Do we call Gary up? Hey, Gary, let's talk about it here. I mean, do you know what she's doing? Oh, I'll tell you, I'm sure you're surprised. So it hasn't turned out as well because Trek doesn't say that that all brokers have to use unique and different DBAs. State has a different thing on that, but Trek doesn't care. But that was the concept of the thing, we'll make them put their name in there or DBA or whatever, then that'll help. But reality is when you look at a lot of advertising and you see that DBA and stuff, and you say, which Keller Williams office, which Coldwell Banker office, which one is that? And sometimes it'll take you doing some real research, unless you can really check out the agent, pull the agent up. And one of the things we'll talk about are the 3 names that you can use as an agent in your advertising to help the consumer figure out who in the heck you are as you work through it. So those are important points. What else is Trek might be concerned with in your advertising? Pardon me?
Fair health.
Fair housing is an issue, and Trek does have their protected classes, which are not the same as our realtor protected classes, are they? Are they? As a realtor, we have protected classes that are listed in Article 10 of the NAR Code of Ethics. And that list is a longer list than the Trek list. Did you know that? Don't nod your head. If you nod your head, I'll ask you what are the 2 different. What are the 2 that we have as realtors that if you're just a license holder in a Trek, you don't have?
And one of them is sexual orientation.
One is sexual orientation. You're on a roll. What's the other one? No,
Family status.
no, that's on both. Age, age, by the way, is not a protected class. Well, your status is gender identity. Sexual orientation, gender identity are the 2 that we have. It's not on the Trek list. And technically, it's not on the federal fair housing list. So fair housing is an issue. Trek wants to make sure that we're complying with fair housing as you work through it. Trek has some concerns about misrepresentation. How might you misrepresent things other than just, incorrect information or anything? Like, how might you misrepresent something in your advertising? Might you misrepresent, in fact, your role, who you are?
Your competency.
I'm not sure, unless you really went overboard in your advertising, you might try to tell them that you're the bestest that there ever was. And
Neighborhood expert.
they'd be lucky if you agree to work with them. But
Neighborhood expert.
neighborhood expert, FHA expert, the nation, things like that. Misrepresenting any of those kinds of things. We'll see in here, we'll talk about things like some use of prohibited phrases. For example, you can't say founder. You can't say president. You can't say CEO. You can't say partner. Because it's Trek's position that leads the consumer to believe you're in charge of brokerage. One of the conversations we had in that town hall meeting that we had over CCAR is that as Douglas Mixon was going through some of these things, and he used phrases, these could be a misrepresentation of who you are, of your role, of whatever. And one of the people in the group said, who gets to decide if it's misrepresentation? Douglas Mixon, the executive director of Trek, says, I do. Right, Trek does. It's Trek's perspective. If Trek thinks on any way, shape, or form that the consumer would look at this and say, well, you said partner, you said founder, you must be in charge of the company. We don't feel like that's true in all cases. We don't think that's the case. And I remember Abby Halliday Realtors, Mary Frances Burleson, who was, we all know Abby was the heart and the icon behind the company. Incredible story and everything. And Mary Frances Burleson was what made everything work. She was the president. She made things work. She was incredible. She's the only person in real estate that intimidates the heck out of me. I mean, I love her. I think I respect what she's done, but she just, I tell you about it. Well, she was the president. But in her advertising, she couldn't say president. Even though if you ask any Abby, he says, well, who's really in charge of Abby? Well, Mary Frances is, but Trek said, no, she's not the broker. Betty Misco is technically the broker. She's the one that's a brokerage for Abby Halliday. So you couldn't say that, she was the president, even though she was. Trek says that would be misleading. That's kind of silly. That's the road they go down. So any misrepresentation along those lines, Trek says, we don't want the public to be confused with who's in charge of the brokerage. And it's important that your advertising be done in a way that everybody is clear, this is who's in charge of the brokerage. And we'll see this in some of the compliance ads as we kind of work through that. And Trek, says you can't be misrepresenting things, we talk about expertise and disclosure, things like that. Those are some of the things that's the underlying concept of Trek says, when we look at your advertising, that's what we look at. And when Trek looks at our advertising, it's because maybe a complaint has been filed about some of the advertising, but more commonly what happens is we're dealing with a Trek complaint on an entirely different issue. And because Trek is not a proactive complaint agency, they operate off of complaints. They are reactive. But when they get a complaint on our brokerage, we've got 19 questions. They deal with the broker questionnaire. And they then look at everything. They look at our policy procedures manual, look at our advertising, they ask questions about our advertising, how we deal with that, how we monitor it, how we work through it, intermediary, our agency policies, all that. And so they use that as opening the door, them look at everything else we do. And that's when we get caught with the advertising as we work through that. It's because they know that, if there's one thing, there's another thing. You work through it. Anything else you can think of before we go into the material to work through, which will cover some of the things we just talked about?
Did we hit that part about team or group? Because, it has to be
Yeah, we're going to talk about the team and group and team names. And we'll see that because what we'll look at, there are two primary sets of rules from TREC that addresses advertising. 535.154, 535.155. And we'll look at those two and we'll see what it talks about. One of the things that it wrote up is it'll talk about team names. And one of the things that I have for you in the thing here is I've got off the TREC website, out of the TREC website. First two pages of us on the TREC website. When we get team names, we'll look at all of our team names are right there. And then talk about that and the DBAs that we have. Janet?
I have to leave to take my husband to the doctor's appointment. I see some names on that list that are people no longer with our market center.
Okay, for example, and Julie and I talked about last night and I gave her the names of some, because we have 30 days to make sure that team names are there. Who jumps out at you? Who's?
Don Prince. No.
Okay, so, but Dan Abbott, yeah, those are, and David Novak, those are ones that I thought I had marked with,
So Don Rose.
yeah, and,
Never remember.
so there are several on this as I look at it.
Catalyst.
I don't know who Catalyst Real Estate is. So I've got several team names in here. I don't know who the agent is behind it.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, I'll send a thing out saying, who are you? I'll get a response, we'll take it out on the TREC website. I had a number in here. I had Marvin here. I had Sharon Ketco. And there, and I had said, we need to take those out. So if you've got some others, say, I don't think you're with us anymore, send me an email. We'll make sure that gets taken out because we do have a limited amount of time with TREC to get those names out. And one of the things we'll look at when we get to this is if your team name is not there, that means we haven't registered with TREC and you can't use it. So you need to send me an email saying, here's the team name we're going to use. And you also have to be able to, and we'll see this in here when we talk about team names. You have to be able to show TREC that you have the authority with the state to use that name as you work through it. Which means that you register that with state work. So we'll look at that. So as we look at these, the first one I want to go to is 154, 535.154, and then we'll look at 155. They may be in reverse order in your packet, I'm not sure. So 154, 535.154, top says Texas Register. And mostly we have advertisements here. And some of them reference to like advertisements, how it's stated in 155. But we talk about the names that you can use in your advertising. Because in your advertising, it needs to have your name and your broker's name. You can only have one of three names, but you can actually have all three, I think. You can always have the exact name on your license. You can always use that. You can use an alternate name if you feel like your name is too hard to pronounce or something, and you register with TREC. Here's an alternate name, and I want to be known by this person. You already have TREC, and you can use that in your advertising. And the third is a team name. The team name, and TREC defines a team as one or more license holders. You don't have to have a team to have a team name. So if you're not going to use the name on your license for an alternate name in all your advertising, the only other name you can use is a team name, which has to end in the word team or group. You can use the word realty within your team name, but it has to end with the word team or group. No exceptions. So it always has to be there. So if you're gonna have a team and use a team name, you simply send that to us, send that to me and Julie, and we will register with TREC. You need to go through the process and, you know, that you, in fact, have the authority to use it, that you filed it with the state and that you can use that. Once we register with Trek, and that's an immediate thing. I mean, it's that same day. We don't have to wait any time. You send us team name, we send it to Trek, it's registered immediately. So you can begin using it in your advertising, but until we have registered your team name with Trek, you can't use it. And the more visible you are, the busier you are, you're a big team, they're looking for you. So you have to make sure you've done that before you start using it. So it talks about here, alternate name, associated broker. Now, alternate name, I just talk about, it's the agent themselves that sends that into Trek. Team names, the broker sends it into Trek. DBAs, there's Trek. But alternate names, you would send that into Trek, and there's a Trek form that you would do that. Associated broker. If you also happen to have a broker's license, as we have several people, Cynthia, for example, is a broker, and we have several people in our office. We've got over 20 people in our office who have a broker's license. They cannot in their advertising say broker. Why? What would the consumer think?
Agency.
Yeah, you're the broker of the agency, you're the broker of the company, you're it. So you'd have to say broker associate or associated broker, one is okay. So if you're gonna advertise and for whatever reason you feel like it's good for people to know that you also have a broker's license, then you'd have to make sure you use one of those phrases. Work through that and talk about what a broker associate or associated broker is there. The assumed business name. This is a little tricky because the state talks about assumed names. It talks about DBA. So when you've got a team name that you're going to register with the state, they're going to refer to it as DBA. But from the Trek perspective, only the broker can have a DBA. Only the broker can have a DBA, doing business as. And that same place where we just looked at it, we'll look at it again in a minute, where we have all the team names. We also have the DBA. So when you look at our website, pull it up, right underneath, you know, it's got broker's license, got all that, got our DBAs. Keller Williams Luxury and National, Keller Williams Realty, Keller Williams Realty Plano, Keller Williams Realty Paris, KW Advisors, KW Plano. Those are all DBAs, except for luxury. Within our office, you've got to qualify to use the luxury designation, use that for a DBA. But all the rest of it, if you don't want to be tagged as being a certain geographical area, say, I don't want to use Plano, I want to use Keller Williams Realty, you can do that. That's one of our DBAs. It's registered with Trek. So theoretically, the consumer sees Keller Williams Realty. That's one of our DBAs. They ought to be able to find us. Now, they're not going to be able to find us unless they also know our address. And you look it up, or they look, find the agent's name and go to the Trek website and look it up. But that's our DBA, and only a broker can have a DBA. In fact, Trek moved, when they did the changes back in 2018, they moved from the old system in which they had two forms, one for agents DBAs and another for brokers. And they changed it, you know, only brokers can have DBAs. So we have a form for brokers DBAs. We have another form that are for team names. So agents can no longer have DBAs as you work through that. Question on that? Zoomers, you have a question on that so far? So, business name, you have, when you advertise, the only DBA you're going to use is the DBA for the broker. Maybe this is a good time to also talk about, if you set up a business entity, because your accountant has said you should receive commissions in a corporation rather than receive them personally. Trek has a process for you to set up a business entity brokerage license. And you have to have a designated broker behind that license. And unless you have a broker's license, it can't be you. So it'll be Mike. It'll be our designated broker, would be the broker behind your business entity. And that business entity has only one purpose in the world. That's to receive commissions in that corporation. You can't advertise an LLC. If it's an LLC, you can't say Joe Blow Agent LLC. You can't use the LLC in your advertising, on your cards, anywhere. So if you, one of the reasons you want to set up a corporation is to gain the benefit of the corporate shield for liability. You won't have it. You cannot advertise using that corporate designation, LLC, S corp, C corp, partnership, can't use it for any of those. All you can do is because you've gone through the process and Trek has issued you a business entity brokerage license, we can now pay that business entity as you work through that process. Otherwise, all commissions come to you directly as opposed to a corporation. So if you used to do that, you can go to Trek website, where it become licensed and check pull down, says business entity brokerage, and it gives you the application process to do that. Generally, agents do this because their CPA or their accountant says, yeah, it's a good idea. There is no agreement between accountants whether it's a good idea or not. Depends on your business structure and how you're set up, whether or not it does anything for you or not. We've already talked about team names. So what are the 3 names you can have in your advertising? The 3 names for you? What are they?
For name,
Your name as it's on your license.
right? Team, group,
Team name or an alternate name. So we call it a team name whether it says team or group either one. Correct, defines that as team or your alternate name. Now, if it's just a derivative such as Bill instead of William or something like that, actually, we don't require that. Figure, most people can figure that out. If it's a totally different name, as you work through it, you may have a really long name with lots of consonants and nobody will ever be able to get that right. So I'm just going to register. I'm going to go by Fred. Okay. Register with Trek. You can do all your advertising. You can be Fred. And you got to work through that. Questions on that? You good? On the second page of this, it does have a little bit more of a conversation about associated broker and notifying Trek is big on, they've got timelines, 10 days, for example. Make sure that before we do anything in advertising, we've done the proper registration with Trek. We make sure that we've done that as you go through. Any question on this before I go to 535.155? Good so far? Looking at 535.155, which is more, here's advertising and here's what it means. And Trek is incredibly broad. The definition of advertising. I mean, it's literally anything you do. It points out to make people do business with you. You want them to know what you do. It's advertising. And radio advertising, billboards, flyers, business cards, anything that you do. You know, all these, or not all these, but you know, there are some on Saturday afternoons on the radio stations. There are different agents who have shows that they do and talk about stuff. In those are advertising. And they have to identify in that advertising who their brokerage is, if in fact, unless it is the brokerage it's advertising. You've got to do that. Television ads, all those the same way as you work through. It gets to be a real challenge. Some of your larger teams are so focused on the team and the team name and who they are that sometimes you don't even know who. I mean, they don't even have their brokerage's name anywhere on there. This is a result partially because of an evolution in our industry, where it used to be that everything was in fact, not just legally, but everywhere else it was in the name of the broker. When I first started the business back in the mid-60s, the concept was, I'm the broker. If you go out and do a deal and get paid, I might let you have some of it. It's all me. All your advertising, that's me. Everything is focused on me, the broker. Everything is the broker. And over many, many years, finally, some smart people said, you know what? If the agents are now producing, nothing else happens. I mean, they're more important than the broker. All the broker is doing is technically they, have, it's a little bit like, one of the interesting things about our system, Keller Williams. And by the way, it's also true of C21, Coral Banks, and they focus on other identities. The Keller Williams system, we have top of our market center, EOP, our operating principal. And we got the CEO / team leader. We got MCAs, we got productivity coach. We got all these kinds of things. Nowhere on our schematic for Keller Williams do you see broker. Broker is just kind of a necessary evil. Trick says, yeah, you gotta have a broker. You got a brokerage, you gotta have a broker. Keller Williams said, okay, we gotta have a broker, so we got a broker in here. But it's nowhere on the list. Broker has really truly no responsibilities in a brokerage. In the system, they got all these other things, that's whatever. So you kind of work through that. But over the years, everybody says, no, the agency is important. Now that went to such extreme that many large teams so focus on who they are, that as far as the consumer is concerned, they are the brokerage. They're responsible for it. I mean, they're it. And you're not even sure who you do. Because in a large brokerage, very few people ever know who the broker actually is. You probably have done many transactions, and unless you mentioned it or said something, they don't really look at that information about broker service firm and see Mike Broder's name on there. They don't have a clue who the broker is. They don't know because that's not the focus is you, the agent. And that's, kind of what we went through and dealt with that. It goes down, we talk about the broker's name needs to be at least half the size of the largest contact information. And number 4 here, it talks about contact information. Says any information that can be used to contact a license holder featured in the advertising will your name, phone number, email address, website address, social media handle, scan code, or other similar information. Which, by the way, a broker's logo is not sufficient for telling us who the broker is, unless that logo has that broker's name, his DBA spelled out. But I mean, like the KW logo, Trick says, presuming everybody in the world knows who that is. Of course they do, but no, it's not sufficient. So you got to make sure you have all of that as you work through it. And then it talks about party and team names, which we talked about as we work through it. Now there's an exception as we give all the information in the advertisement of things that we've got to provide. And number 6C at the bottom of the page. For an advertisement on social media or by text, the information by this section may be located in a separate page on the account user's profile page of the license holder. If the separate page or account user profile is, go to the next page, readily accessible by direct link from the social media or text and readily noticeable on the separate page or in the account user profile. So if there's not enough room in your Facebook or in your social media, whatever, they give that direct link to where you have that information, that's in compliance. You're okay to do. So they created that exception because in many cases, there's not a lot of room in there. You start having to put all that other information in. Pretty a little bit of a challenge as you kind of work through that. And then under D, for purpose of this section, and you'll see a number of things in there, what it means. An advertisement that misleads or is likely to deceive the public tends to create a misleading impression or implies the sales agent is responsible for the operation of the real estate brokerage business includes, but is not limited to any advertisements. And then we got a list. I got a whole bunch of items here that say you do any of these things, you're not in compliance as you work through it. It's interesting, by the way, a salesperson can own a brokerage. Salesperson can be the owner of, a salesperson could own the brokerage. But you couldn't advertise that salesperson as the broker or as the president or as in charge of it, even though he may be, in fact, you couldn't even say he's the advertising owner. Because the public say, oh, he's owner, it must mean he's in charge of it. No, he didn't. In fact, his license is sitting under the broker, whoever that might be. In fact, you don't need a license to own a real estate company. You can't share any commissions, you can share in the profits. If there are any, you could do that, but You don't have to have a real estate license to own a real estate company as you work through it. So here's some of the things. One, that is inaccurate, any material fact or representation, which we kind of talked about. That does not comply with this section, which is one, Greg likes to use that nice little umbrella phrase. If you don't comply with this section, so it's anything. Identifies the sales agent as a broker. There are sales agents out there who mislead people into thinking that they're brokers when they're not. Because obviously being a broker is an incredibly prestigious thing. If you don't think so, just ask any of us brokers. We get invited to more parties, we get, very prestigious ones. That's a lot of really good. By the way, when you become a broker and people know it, be careful, because people will start asking you a lot of questions. They figure, oh, you know stuff, you're a broker. Although we've all been in a transaction which it was probably the agent on the other side who ends up being the broker. And it didn't help at all if I could take it as a broker, raise your problem as you work through it. 4, this is some of that stuff I talked about earlier. Can't use the title such as owner, president, CEO, COO, or similar title, email or website address that implies you're responsible for the operation of brokerage. You just, this back to the thing, Trish says, if you do this, it's going to mislead the public. They're going to think you're in charge of the whole.
Bob?
Yes, question.
Yes, so say you're a sales agent and you own it, but you're like basically an inactive sales agent. Like
You own what?
you own the brokerage. But you don't have, like, you're not
Back involved in the day-to-day.
Yes.
You just take the money and run.
pretty much.
Oh, your way back and forth to Vegas. Yeah.
Like, can you then still advertise or because
And use the word
you
owner,
have,
because you're not in charge of the brokerage.
okay,
Yeah, and it's a good question. It's just because you own the company doesn't mean that in any advertising you say it unless you're also the broker. You're just the owner. You have that in your advertising. Because people think you're in charge of the brokerage. And you might be, the reality is your relationship with the broker. You may have just hired an old college buddy who's got a broker's license. And you give him a little bit of money every month because you need a brokerage. And you're the one in charge, you're the one running everything. I mean, you're actively involved every day. Yes, so whose company is it? Who responsible? Well, Bob is. He's the one that, he's our owner and he's in charge and not in your advertising. Because if you're not the broker, you can't say that. You can't say owner, you can't say CEO, you can't say any of those. Even though everybody in the world believes that person is one responsible for that company. Because no, because one, they don't have the authority. That salesperson who's not the broker doesn't have the authority over that, over the other license holders in that brokerage. That makes that clear separation.
so if you are the broker, then you can
You can advertise if you're the broker, the broker, the sponsoring broker.
so not like an associate, you have to be like.
The associate broker, you'd have to use the word associate.
Okay,
An associate broker or broker associate. If you're associate broker, you can't just use the word broker. Because they would think you are the broker. One of the things that we're talking about in the broker responsibility working group, we just met last week. One of the things that we're looking at is the difference between someone who is a broker as opposed to a sponsoring broker. Because right now, if you have a broker's license and you wake up one day and said, I'm gonna have a company, start sponsoring agents, there's nothing that keeps you from doing that. You got a broker's license, you can do that. Even though you may have not had any training or have done anything that helps you understand that it's a different position to be in as a sponsoring broker than just an individual who has a broker's license. It's a different level of responsibility. You've taken them on, you got to train them and so on and so forth. So we're trying to look at that distinction. And our group made a proposal to the commission. They'll look at it in their November meeting. And what we're going to require is that part of the process, the application to become a broker, and there's a whole set of educational and experience requirements to get a broker's license. We're adding the requirement that in your qualifying courses, you have to take the broker responsibility course, a 6-hour course. With the hope that that course, especially as they've just rewritten it, and I think it may in fact do this in the new version, versions, that may give this person who may be about to become a sponsoring broker some sense of the responsibility of a sponsoring broker. Now, speaking of my example, we were just talking about large teams and how responsible they are for everybody on their team, but who's really responsible for that large team is in that corner office.
Yeah, Bob.
No, Bob.
Mike Brody,
Oh, yeah, Mike.
the OP, and the designated broker. If we had a different OP who also is a designated broker, then that person might become more aware of challenge of a team may not have as clear disclosure in all their advertising as they should. Not saying that would be you.
Of course not.
We might want to visit later about it. Thanks for coming by, Dan.
Yeah.
But so can we do any of those as you work through it? It's a different level of responsibility, accountability to be a sponsoring broker. Because as was already mentioned, everything is at the broker level. I mean, when Trek has a complaint against a salesperson, they automatically, not only will they send out things, requirements to the salesperson, they'll send out a requirement to the broker, the sponsoring broker, the designated broker, as you work through that. That's how Trek solved the problem about 10, 12 years ago. When they were having a problem with compliance and they're having a problem with accountability. At the time, they didn't have as many license holders as they have now, but they still had over 100,000. And I say, how can we hold 100,000 license holders responsible for being accountable, being compliant? And somebody said, you know what? Every one of those agents, every one of those license holders has one thing in common. They all have what? A sponsoring broker. We don't have as many sponsoring brokers at the time. We have probably 15, 20,000. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold the sponsoring broker responsible and accountable for all their agents, including all their advertising. And that began the process of broker responsibility from that original conversations. Somebody said, yeah, let's hold the broker responsible. And somebody else said, great idea, really good idea. But shouldn't we tell these sponsoring brokers what that means? Should we explain to them, hey, if you're responsible, and here's all the things it means. In fact, we've got a whole section of track rules, 535.2 has this really clear title, broker responsibility. And most of that stuff in there came because what they said was, well, let's train them. Okay. So that was the beginning of the broker responsibility course, the 6-hour course. That every 2 years has been revised and revolved and so forth. And so we did that. And it was a great step forward. Every 2 years is a better course. The one we've got right now is good. The one we're about to have, we haven't seen it yet because it was just written. Those of us who teach it have to go to recertification, and I'm going to recertification in next week. And we're told that it's really different. It's much better. And so that may really help because if you're going to be a sponsoring broker, you need to know that's a different world. Because right now there's nothing that tells them it's a different world. They don't have to, if all of a sudden they start sponsoring agents, and let's say you're in the first month of your 2-year renewal cycle, and you open up a company, you've got a broker's license and you decide to sponsor agents, and now you got 10 or 20 agents. You don't have to take the broker responsibility course yet, just within your renewal period. You could go another 2 years, and so before you renew, at the end of that 2 years, you need to take it. And you've just had agents you've been sponsoring and training and all that stuff without really knowing what it means because you haven't taken the course yet. You have to take it. So we said, no, before you got to do this. Because we feel like that's an important step because as you work through and you see what you're responsible for. The other thing that we have done is not only do you have to take that course, we recommend you take that course. Before you get your broker's license, we've expanded to all brokers must take the broker responsibility course. Right now, if you're a single proprietor broker, you don't have to take the course. If you don't sponsor, you're not the designated broker behind an entity, you don't sponsor anyone, you don't have to take it, even if you have a broker's license. We've changed that, or we're gonna change that, saying, no, everybody has to do it as they work through it. Number 8, this is that thing I mentioned earlier. Anything that causes a member of the public to believe that a person not licensed to conduct real estate brokerage is engaged in real estate brokerage. Where they might come into us when you got that husband and wife and they're advertising, but only one of them is licensed. By having both of them in the advertising, you may be, in some way implying to the public that they're both real estate agents, real estate license holders. And that'd be a violation as you work through that. And that little bit of 9 too. 10, confusion regarding the permitted use of a property. What in the world might that be? What could we be doing that might cause someone to think something about the permitted use of a property, that it's okay to use it for this, that, or whatever? What do you think? How could you represent something about the use of a property?
Sounds commercial one, some.
Yeah. Maybe you say it could be a commercial property and it's not zone commercial. Maybe you say it's a certain,
Horses on it when it can't,
pardon me?
or it can have horses on it when it can't.
They can't, yeah. Yeah, so it's used for all kinds of things. Maybe you say it's residential when in fact it's not residential. Maybe it's in an area zone commercial. Maybe you don't have the ability to live in it. Maybe the people living in it now got grandfathered in, but once it's transferred, the next person doesn't. But
That's
the ability.
in Houston and anything goes.
Oh, well, yeah. I lived 5 years in Houston. It was amazing. Right next to these beautiful houses, a convenience store, and there's no zoning anywhere. All you got are deed restrictions. So anything like that, maybe talking about a piece of property, and it can be used for investment purposes. Someone can use it, or, maybe you can do it for short-term rentals, and maybe you can't. Because maybe it's in an HOA that doesn't allow that or only allows a certain percentage or whatever.
So this is like super helpful.
Hypothetical?
Yes.
That too.
But it, implies, so like, if it's say it's a commercial property in the middle of the city, or just got done to it, but you're, selling the property and you're out there riding a horse and you're like, look how great this property is, but you don't necessarily say it's commercial. Does that technically imply that you can use it?
You're equating a property that can be used for agriculture as commercial.
Yes, with that.
No,
Okay.
those two different zonings, those two different statuses. It could be that you could have the ability to do both. But you could have the agricultural ability and not have the commercial ability at all. Because they're even within commercial, there are different categories of commercial.
Okay.
Office warehouse, for example, industrial, for example. High rise. You've got all commercial where you're gonna have high rise offices, but some other where the office of maximum height is 4 floors, something like that. The key is if you've done something that causes someone to believe, wait, there he is riding around a horse on thing, this must be able to agricultural, this or that or whatever. You need to be paying attention that all of a sudden they watch you do something and think, oh, he's telling us how this property can be used. You need to say, whoa, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not telling you this can be used as a farm or a ranch or a dude ranch or whatever. I'm just riding a horse. I like to ride horses, but listen, buyers, your responsibility to determine your use. And then you want to stick something in paragraph 6D, the objections paragraph, and deal with that. But to your point, you have to be very careful because people will read things into what you say and what you do. They'll read it into and they say, wow, here's what they just told me we can do. Here's what they just told me is what's happening. And you got to be very careful of that because they will hold you responsible when they buy the property and they say, well, you told me I could do this, or you told me I could do that, or you told me I had this kind of exemption. at an ag exempt, and now I find out I don't have one. So you've got to be very careful, because there's a line out the door of people wanting to come after us. We're an easy target. Why are we an easy target? I know.
You're big.
Do what?
We're big.
Well, deep pocket.
Yes, I know what I meant.
And we got a deep pocket for two reasons. Well, we got a deep pocket because we're big. The others, we have E&O. And many people out there see broker with an E&O as a blank check. Go ahead and sign it. We'll fill in the amount later. And without exception, every E&O suit that we've been involved in, regardless of how frivolous it was, how stupid it was, how ridiculous it was, the plaintiff ended up with something. It's just the nature of that beast. Just, so we are. So you have to be very careful. And one of the things that when you first start working with a client, have a good casual conversation, ask them what their hobbies are. If small claims court is one of their hobbies, may not be going to be working. I promise you, there's some out there that's and to deal with realtors and suing them, that's a part-time job with them. That's their little extra income stream. Just, work on that. 11, value of the property. In fact, we'll see a disclaimer that we have in some of the information. Because, we can't be talking about the fact that based on appraisal value of it, and we have to make sure we have that language that it's not compliant with use path standards. That is simply, if we're going to do a CMA or broker opinion value, we're not doing an appraisal. Number 12 implies the person making the advertisement was involved in a transaction regarding a property when the person had no such role. It's interesting. This gets a little bit into, Trey gets a little bit into some of the NETRIS rules and some of the MLS rules. Whether or not you can advertise you sold the property or not. So a property is sold in your farm area and you send flyers out implying to people that you were in some way, shape or form involved in the sale. Now, if you were involved in the sale, either on the listing side or the buyer side, you can show that you've sold the property. That's an NAR rule. NAR will let you do that. You don't have to have been the listing agent to say that you sold the property. In fact, one of the incidental things that you get to do, if you represent the buyer after closing, with permission of your buyer that you own the property, say, I'd like to put sold sign up showing that my name that I've sold the property, just a little advertising there. And as long as you say, yeah, great idea. We think you should do that. You get to do that. And listing agent, whoa, what are you doing putting that sign up on my listing? It's not your listing anymore. It's closed. You're out of here. You don't have anything to say about what we do here. Only the property owner does.
I'm glad you brought that up. I saw that over on Swiss Avenue. I was so confused because
Call it on what?
I saw it over on Swiss Avenue about a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I was so confused because I go well, it was, I think, a Dave Perry or something that sold this property. So I didn't realize how you do that.
Now, what is interesting is that listing agents violate the rule, and one of the rules in the code of ethics, leaving their for sale sign after closing.
Oh, my gosh. There is a commercial property in downtown Louisville that it's a 1 acre that has been up for sale. It sold over 2 years ago. And their big wooden sign is still on that corner. And I've called them more than
For
once.
sale sign?
It's for sale sign.
Really?
And it's a KW agent too, not ours, of course, but they have, like where they have the big wooden sign made.
Yeah.
4x4 posts.
Uh-huh.
And it drives me nuts because I have somebody who keeps wanting, but the sign's there. I'm like, I know Mr. So-and-so, but I've called and I've recalled and I check every 6 months to see
Well,
if it happens. to be for
violation
sale
of
again.
code of ethics.
But it's driving me nuts because this person is
Well,
wanting.
they drive you nuts, file a complaint. We could file a, certainly a code of ethics complaint.
They're like, oh, no, we sold that, like whenever.
What's the complaint there? What is the complaint there?
It's false advertising is what I'd say.
Yeah, you're misrepresenting your authority. And that's just, so the guy who's got the sign up, he would have to have permission from the owner, have that sign up, and probably would have to actually still be for sale. If it's not for sale, then he doesn't have permission. He may have, the owner say, well, yeah, you know, we have some good advertising, whatever. If he wants to just put a sign up there or whatever, oh, you know, Joe Blow or whatever, that's okay, but it can't say for sale.
It does.
It's not for sale. That's misleading. That is, you know.
It's a great spot because Louisville has two one-way streets, you know, coming and going through Old Town, and it's on the one going past the City Hall. And it's there, I mean, like, it's at a light, it's like, it's a prime location for advertising, but it's.
We understand the good idea of how they're doing it. Just, they'll be doing it as you work through that process. So you need to make sure that, about a number 13, about a property that is subject to an exclusive listing agreement without permission of the listing broker and without disclosing the name of the listing broker, unless the listing broker has expressly agreed in writing to waive disclosure. So as you're going through and you're representing the property, that's okay if you have permission. So when you put all those other properties in your advertising, you make sure you reference to who's listing it is. Such and such as you work through that, have their permission. So once your listing agreement is up, you've got 10 days to make that change. And then after the closing of the transaction, the current status of it, including your advertising. And don't think that this changes your obligation in MLS. Because in MLS, your change of status has to be, anybody know what the time frame is?
Yeah.
72 hours. You have 72 hours. And this is all the way through the process. One, when your option period is up, 72 hours. Change your status, or whatever, 72 hours. When it closes, 72 hours. So that's your time frame to change it. And we get little violation things all the time about that. So. And if it doesn't get taken care of, they can find you. You work through the process. 16 offers to rebate a portion of the license holder's compensation to a party. If the advertisement is not disclosed, payment rebate is subject to the consent of the party. The license holder represents the transaction. And we talked a little bit more about the subject. If you're going to give a rebate, if you're the listing agent, you're going to rebate to the buyer to make the deal work. You have to have permission from your client. And we have other requirements. If anyone is going to rebate money to the buyer, if there's financing, then the buyer's lender has to approve it. And that rebate has to be in the settlement statement. This is not a referral fee. This is a rebate to different animals.
Does that apply to the year of tacos by this property?
Does it do what?
A year of free tacos if you buy this property?
Wow, you know what? Depends on where it's from. Is this Taco Casa? Where is it from?
There's some real estate writers that say you get free pizza with this house or
Yeah.
free taco. Actually, I had clients that got a free pizza.
Yeah.
They sell them at CCAR.
What?
They have like free pizza, right?
Free pizza.
Have a sign there, CGAR?
Yeah.
Your pizza?
Buy this house, get a free pizza.
Or something.
Wow.
Seriously.
I know, that's why I asked. Is that compensation?
I'm not gonna buy a house. 'Cause
Well, it's something of value, but it's not a referral, it's not a rebate. It's a little bit kind of like.
That's true.
It's
Kind of
like
like a
thrown in.
closing gift, maybe, yeah. 17 offers a rebate a portion of last holder's commission. Contingent upon the party's use of a specified service provider are subject to approval by third parties such as lender. Unless the advertising also contains a disclosure that payment of the rebate is subject to restrictions such as approved by the lender or be on the settlement statement. I should work through that. 18 offers or promotes use of a real estate service provider other than the license holder, and the license holder expects to receive compensation if a party uses those services. If the advertisement does not contain disclosure, license holder may receive compensation from the service provider. This deals with home warranties. Also deals a little bit with Section 8 of RESPA. You have to deal with going through that. 19 ranks the license holder or another service provider unless the ranking is based on objective criteria disclosed in the advertisement. This was a real challenge as we worked through this. Because We have our vendors, and we have our preferred vendors. If we rank them, it can't be ranked on, well, here's the number one, here's the best one, here's, based on volume we do, whatever. Has to be some other objective criteria, such as advertising. Advertising can be an objective criteria. That if you're going to put them and rank them on any way, shape, or form, it can be based on that. But you can't base it on anything else because the feeling is the consumer is misled, thinking that you're saying this is the number one home warranty company because they really do great, or the number one inspector because they're really great. When in fact, they just advertise with us a lot. And that's why they got the number. That's why they're on the vendor wall. They do that. Trick is, they were having a challenge with, and this happened first down in Houston, and involved inspectors. And inspectors went through the process, and working through Trex inspection committee. Lee Warren, who at the time was the chair of that committee, was very involved in this. And he's an inspector and a person in our area that many of us know. And there were companies, large brokerages in Houston, that were ranking and were requiring inspectors to have access to their agents, pay them a fee. In some cases, it was $2,500 a month. If you want to be an inspection company and if you want access to our agents and advertise in our office, here's what it's going to cost you. And Trek had to pass a new rule that says, no, you can't do that. That was in addition to some aspects of the rest of the rules as you dealt with that. And it finally got quashed because everybody was clear this is not to the benefit of the consumer as you work through that. It's totally misleading. So that, but that it got really ugly for a while. Absolutely. And part of it, Houston Associated of Realtors, which is the dominant, certainly the dominant association in Texas. And depending on any given quarter, they're the number one or two largest association in the country. Interesting that the one that they do battle with on a regular basis is the Fort Lauderdale Miami Association, which is also huge, like 30,000 members like they have. But HAR really began to see writing on the wall and say, yeah, it's not good happening in our backyard. Work on that. Yeah, work. And 20, which that states or implies that the license holders teaches or offers commission approved courses in conjunction with an approved school or other approved organization unless the license holder is approved by the commission to teach or offer the courses. So you've got to be approved by Trek. Trek no longer licenses instructors. Trek licenses provider, and the providers are the ones who certify the instructors that work through this. All these things, and both of these, this long list here, is to help give you a sense of Trek's mindset and what they look for and what they're concerned with as they work through this. It's valuable to us as we go through, and this is a little bit kind of like when I talk about the concepts in the contract. These are the concepts that kind of guides Trek's concerns as they work through all this. I think this is a good reference sheet. I think having some sense of what they look at and why they look at it helps us avoid doing something that if a Trek complaint hits us, now Trek is looking at all of our advertising and everything else, then this is something that if we're in compliance with, it's an important thing. Because in those 19 questions of broker questionnaires that Trek sends you for a Trek complaint, part of it is, how does a broker monitor their advertising? How does a broker make sure they do that? It's interesting because Trek does require broker to monitor the advertising and make sure that the agents are, in fact, following the advertising rules. What Trek wants to know is, how does the broker do that? But Trek does not require the broker to monitor all the advertising, to literally on a personal level. I mean, in a larger operation, you can't do it. I mean, even operation our size, even if, like, as the broker said, well, I want to allow my staff to do this, especially Bob and compliance and all those kinds of things. In the reality, what we do is we set up rules, because anytime you do advertising, as you go through the process, you make sure you're compliant with the track advertising on the KW website. You look in there and it's got all the advertising in there, and make sure you follow their requirements as you work through that. And what we ask you to do is, if you're going to do any advertising, particularly before you spend any money on your advertising, run it by us. Say, I'm going to use this kind of an ad, I'm going to do this kind of whatever. And we rely on that, and we kind of operate off of a compliance basis. There's no way physically we can go and look at everybody's advertising before they do anything. We have to rely on them to understand, here are the rules, and here's what you need to do to provide these things to us. The track realizes, now, if you're a little company with 10 agents, I can say, I would pretty much expect you to be on top of all that with your 10 agents. I didn't even know that it's 5 of them are in your family. Hardest part. And we did, before I go into some of those, I do want to make sure, I want you to make sure you look at this with the DBAs, to know what DBA you can use. If not on this list, you can't use this. Remember, this is DBA for the broker. When all your advertising, either have the name that's on our license, broker's name on our license. Anybody know what the broker's name on our license is? To the very top. To the very top. Texas Star Pad Partners Limited. That's our name on our license. So you can have the name on our license. Yeah, any of these DBAs. I hadn't thought about this part, but technically, you could also put Charles Michael Brody. So that's our designated broker's name. I wouldn't put Mike Brody, but I put Charles Michael, his full name on the broker's line. He's the designated broker. And I would encourage you to look at the team names. We'll work on the ones that shouldn't be there. But if you've got a team name that you want to use or are already using, it's not here, you get a retro track. It means you need to send it to me. Send it to us and take a look at it and say, okay, you send it in track, and you need to make sure if push comes to shove, instruct said, well, we need to see that you have authority to use that. Do that. Now, look at this. This actually was a track slide that they were using in their advertising rules. And some of the stuff we've already talked about, and this talks about when this came out, was finally effective in May of 2018. And talked about the registration, talked about the names. People say, well, what name can I use? 1 or 3. You can actually use all 3 if you wanted to. That's it. That's all you get to use. Your name on your license, your alternate name, or your team name. You work through that. They all must be registered with the track before you use them. So I'll just go out and start using all that. And track, as long as you don't have any prohibited terms, CEO, partner, all that kind of stuff, you can use the word realty. Track really doesn't care what you say as long as you've got team or group at the end. And then it goes on the next page, talk about team name is not an assumed business name of the broker. So you can't be having both of those. You can't be doing things that are independent of the broker. Everything needs to be part of the whole brokerage. Next page under where it talks about advertisement. We talked about that. We just looked at advertisements. We looked at those 20 instances of advertisements that you're not being in compliance, and just goes through and talks about all those on the next several pages. On 535.17 estimated worth sales price. That language at the bottom, this represents an estimated sales price of this property. It's not the same as the opinion value and appraisal, followed by a licensed appraiser under the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. Every time you do a CMA or group price premium, you've got to make sure that you've got that language in there, whether it's for a loan or not for a loan or whatever it's for, so people don't think it's an appraiser. Unless you're a licensed appraiser, you can't be doing that. So now we've got some ads and we're looking at the brokerage scenario. And here's the broker. Here's who the broker is. Here's a sales agent. Here's an assumed business name, registered with track, Brokerage Realty, and a team name, registered with track, Vader Supreme. Well, let's look at some ads. For example, the one says for sale, newly acquired planets. Call Darth Vader, phone number, Death Star Properties. It's compliant. Well, it says it is because it includes the sales agent's name, the brokerage name, and at least half the size of the largest contact information. So it is compliant. Next one says for sale, newly acquired planets, call Darth Vader. Vader Supreme Team, Death Star Properties LLC, Darkside as well. Not compliant. Team name SNAB must always include the broker's name or another assumed name of the broker. The use of the agent's name and a team name does not imply the agent, the person responsible for the operation of brokerage, because the broker's name is included separately and does not contain the agent's name. This will get into another one where you can't, if you've got a name, and maybe it's your brother, cousin, or father, or something like that who owns a company, and their name is the name of the company or the brokerage, you can't have that name as part of your team name. It would imply that you're in charge of the brokerage. The next one says, for sale, newly acquired planets, call Darth Vader CEO, number and Darkside Realty. It's not compliant because of the CEO. You're saying CEO, partner, owner, and that kind of thing. The next one says, for sale, newly acquired planets, call Darth Vader, Vader and Company. It's not compliant because not the half the size of the largest contact information. Doesn't end in the word group or team. So if it were Darth Vader team, Darth Vader group, and the correct size would be good. For sale, next one, for sale, newly acquired planets, call Darth Vader, Vader and Associates Group. You didn't see that earlier, but the phrase and associates is not acceptable. As Craig says, where you say, Bob Baker and Associates, they're going to think that Bob Baker's in charge of the guy. The phrase and associates means you're all associates, everybody. So an agent can't use the phrase and associates. So they can't use that. That's one of the prohibited phrases. So a different scenario, the broker is with you, be Homes Inc. Your logo, designated broker Yoda, sales agent Luke Skywalker. DBA, Skywalker Lightsaber Homes with you, B Homes. Register team name, the Salesforce Group, register alternate name, Lefty Skywalker. So, in this say, is it compliant? Let our force be with you. Call Luke Skywalker with you, B Homes. Yeah, it's compliant. It's got the agent's name, got the brokerage name, the DBA, half the size, so we're good. Next one, let our force be with you. Call Luke Skywalker, sales agent, Skywalker Lightsaber Homes with UB Homes. It's not compliant. It does contain the agent's name or assumed name of the broker. The use of part of the agent's name and the assumed name is where you run into a problem. Can't be doing that. I just talked about. So two choices to fix this. We can include a different registered broker assumed name or use the designation sales agent. So you can say sales agent Luke Skywalker. So people would think that Luke Skywalker is in charge of the brokerage. Next one says, let our force be with you. Call Luke Skywalker Realtor, number Salesforce Group, with UB Homes. Says no, it contains a sales agent name and a registered team name into the word group. It must also include the name or registered assumed name of the broker, at least half the size of the large contact, and it's a smaller, not compliant. Next one says, let our force be with you. Call Luke Skywalker sales agent with UB Homes. Not compliant, sales agent's name, the broker's logo does not contain the broker's name. The logo is not acceptable. Even though we presume everybody in the world knows what KW means. Maybe some people in foreign countries like Oklahoma may not know. Next one, let our force be with you. Call Lefty Skywalker, Salesforce Group, UB Homes. Yeah. Registered alternate name of sales agent. Remember, one of the things we have here is this alternate name is Lefty Skywalker. And so that is compliant. Let our force be with you. What's my homework? Get our address here to find out. All the time or sell your home. Said may be compliant. If you change your nation, has the brokerage name and half the size. It provides a tool, provide an estimate of the worth of the sales price. As long as they have that disclaimer we talked about earlier saying, okay, this is not an appraisal, not a penny of value, it doesn't comply with the dispatch standards. And the last one there is let our force be with you. With my homework, enter address not to find out, and then we see the one that needs to be changed, where you add that disclaimer in there, that's not part of the dispatch standards. Those are examples of compliant or not compliant, so sometimes you're working up an ad and you go, wow, I wonder if that's in compliance or not compliance. And you can reference to some of those examples. You're going to be an owner agent, you sell your own property. The next thing you should have there are rules dealing with owner agent policy. You see that? We got the 7 things there. Maybe towards the end, should be in the next page in it. I have it. Got it?
It's on this packet, it's on the first packet. Yes.
Oh, okay, second, that next package there. So if you've got your own property that you're going to sell, you need to have someone else in the office do a CMA report. An inspection needs to be in the transaction. If the buyer's not going to do an inspection, you at least need to have the buyer sign a waiver. Because they have the option and we encourage them to, and they chose not to. Seller's agent must provide a home warranty for the buyer. So you, as a seller, you've got to provide a home warranty. Or you must complete a Texas Realtor seller disclosure notice. 5, the trip promulgated forms must be used for residential transactions. Those first requirements are all in our errors and emissions insurance. Those are all requirements of a E&O. Then the seller agent must disclose, listing agent is the seller in MLS, and you must disclose your license in the contract in paragraph 8. Yes.
Bear down on the detail in number 3, if done, insists that the buyer gets to have warranty or not.
We don't have any E&O coverage.
Pardon?
We don't have any E&O coverage. That's a requirement in our errors and emissions insurance.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of agents don't know that your protection to give a seller's warranty and they're trying to negotiate a strong deal.
Yep.
Skip it. So my question is that.
Well, if you're an owner, remember what we're talking about here is you're an owner selling your own property. So you're the seller. You need to provide a home warranty to the buyer.
Oh, for some of their own person.
Yeah.
Your own selling, this right here is you're the owner agent selling your own property.
Speak out that idea. Sometimes the buyer's agent doesn't want to ask for it.
No, we don't care.
No, but it's you.
Yeah, we don't care. Okay, she's right, but she's right. In this market, because you don't want to ask the seller to do it. In this situation, we don't care what the buyer wants. We will have to give it to them.
So you say pick who you want, but you will have one. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
And so.
Now, remember, all that is, it's in the contract.
It's a reimbursement.
It's a reimbursement, but the seller has to buy it, say, okay, a dollar amount, put a dollar amount in there. Seller has to reimburse them. The seller has to pay for home warranty for the buyer if it's an owner agent property.
Okay, now here's my real question, right?
Okay,
If that doesn't happen, does it change the deductible in case there's trouble later?
there's no deductible. You have no coverage. You literally do not have coverage under the errors and omissions insurance policy. You have no coverage.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal and all the companies have it.
No, that's.
Any difference if you're selling your own investment?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what kind of, no, it does not matter. Okay. It does not matter whether it's self-disclosure or not. It does not matter what kind of property it is. If it's residential property, you have to provide a home warranty to the buyer. You have to. Or you personally do not have any insurance. It's gone, but not, and I've got one of these in Rockwall. person owner, and she didn't know it. And she didn't provide it. And she has no E&O coverage. And we've received a demand letter from an attorney on the transaction with buyers coming after her. Hasn't so far included us, so far her. And I've had to explain to them, says you have to recognize that you're coming after an individual seller. And that seller has no insurance, has no errors of mission insurance. So all you're looking to is this seller for any compensation. You're not looking to anyone else because she does not have errors of missions insurance in that transaction. And that's just one of the requirements for E&O company that I do business with. And that particular happens, Mr. Travelers there, same rule in CNA, which we use here. They say, if you don't do this, have none. Now, there's a whole different category. If it's not owner agent, if it's a normal transaction, they have some requirements. So if you're the listing agent transaction, and it's not owner agent property, the E&O has what they call a disappearing deductible. Where if we comply and do these things, our deductible can go away. But one of those is to provide a home warranty to the buyer. So if you don't provide a home warranty for the buyer, we don't have the ability to make that deductible go away. It's a big point for them. And I would think that except for the people in this class, most people don't know about it. Most people aren't aware of it. Unfortunately, this is recorded and all of you know about it. And as you go out and have your happy hours, I guess, oh, by the way, did you know? Here's the deal. But yeah, it's an absolute, it's a requirement, it has to be there.
If you own a property and you're an agent, you must do these things to have E&O. It
Yeah,
doesn't
regardless.
matter whether it's rental or your one you live
It
in,
doesn't matter.
or you inherited it and now you own it.
Even if it's not a property that's owned by the agent, just a normal deal, you still have to do it for any chance at getting a disappearing deductible. We still have E&O coverage. You still have E&O coverage. It's just that the deductibles will be there. We don't have any way to take the deductible away. You still, in this office, under the current policy, it's $5,000. And 70% of that's yours. So it's a $3,500 cost. You could have made that go away if you'd followed all the requirements. It's not property you own, it's property you have listed. And if you'll provide these, including the home warranty to the buyer, then we have that ability to make the deductible go away. So it doesn't cost anything to the defense of the suit. Because remember, our only exposure in the deductible generally is just the legal fees. And they have $5,000 overnight. We don't generally have any exposure to settlement. That's all the E&O company. Our exposure is just the settlement. I mean, it's just the legal fees. It's just $5,000, which is almost always the legal fees are going to be that or more. Once they pass that $5,000 threshold, that's all the E&O. It's all the E&O company's exposure. We only have that $5,000. That's why, frankly, I don't really care about lawsuits. The biggest cost of a lawsuit is the disruption in your business and in your life. From a money standpoint, not that big a deal, but what it does to the agent is huge. And I'm very understanding of that. I've seen it. I've seen it put strong, experienced agents in tears. Because they feel it, because they made the mistake. The first mistake they made is they read the lawsuit. And there are no rules from a plaintiff attorney in what they can accuse or respondent or defendant from saying. And the more bad things they say, the better chance they think they have. I mean, and the things they say when you read, they go, I never drowned puppies. Why are they saying that? But they'll say bad things about you and you can't take it personally because none of it means anything. So you've got to just, move beyond that. It can be a real challenge. And then, the other, of course, you need to list it with another one of our agents because of what I've got down here, this advisory note. You want to eliminate any interaction between you, the owner, agent, and a buyer. Because if you never interacted with them, you never talked to them, you never had no interaction, they can't say, well, the seller told me, the seller said, but you never met, you never talked. want the listing agent to have all that interaction. Because as I read my note here, you're an owner agent. And they come after you. And even though in our E&O policy, we have a section where we have a rider for owner agent coverage, we've got that there. If you did something wrong and ends up in a lawsuit against you, the seller / agent. What happens, and it's happened to us, we've been through this. The underwriter for the E&O company had a fairly good conversation. Well, they good. They denied coverage for our agent. I said, you know, it doesn't seem right because they did all the right things. They did all warranty, they did all that kind of stuff. So why is my agent not covered? Well, we look at it and it was basically something that the seller represented. And the seller has no coverage. Only the agent has coverage. Now, if the agent had misrepresented something, then you'd have coverage. I say, whoa. The agent and the seller are the same person. How do you decide who it was who just misrepresented something? And the underwriter kind of circles it. You know, it's kind of tough, and it's kind of a case by case basis. I said, what you're telling me is just no coverage. And you find it, and you're right. Even though we do it, even though we've got everything, what you need to understand is if you're selling your own property and a lawsuit happens, you personally have no coverage. Now we do, brokerage does, but you personally don't have it. So you better go overboard in what you do for disclosures and everything else, in case something happens, to make sure you have some coverage. It is a challenge. So is this good? We understand kind of what we're doing here. Because we encourage investment. We think that's a good thing. But if you're, and by the way, the closer if all you're doing is investments and you're flipping houses, we're probably not the right place for you. It's really, we encourage investments. We like the idea of investment. And I think Jessica's going to do a class on investing. Maybe she and I probably should talk, maybe. I'll tell her I said.
And it's probably good to just check in with her.
At least you're not on video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure on video, it wouldn't.
Yeah, I would hurt to check in with
Wouldn't
her.
hurt to change a little bit, but the reality is, what the E&O company likes to see is long-term ownership. That maybe you were the original owner, you've owned the property quite a while, but if you've owned it for less than 6 months and you just flipped it, you've got more liability. And what that means is a little more liability. If there's a problem, take care of the problem, is all out of your pocket.
Is there any kind of insurance, the bridge up insurance that you could get? Like having insurance, like, you know, some kind of insurance personally.
Well,
For selling.
depending on what it is, depending on what the problem, your homeowner's policy gives you some protection. You know, one of the transactions that we had, we were the listing agent and there was a personal injury situation. And the buyer was injured fairly significantly, falling through a hole in the deck in the back. And so they sued seller and they sued us. We had coverage under E&O and the seller had coverage in their insurance, homeowners insurance, up to their insurance level, up to that. So they went through that, went after the seller with that, and then went after us for E&O. And both of them ended up, you know, taking care of the situation. But it was one of those cases that when they went after us, you know, one of the things we had to explain to the plaintiff buyer is that personal injury is not covered under, you know, that's a specific exclusion. So what we had to end up with is going to our business liability insurance. So we've got insurance for our brokerage, and that kicked in. And the great thing I like about our business liability insurance, where we State Farm now, they've done a pretty good job. There's no deductible. It's first dollar coverage up to the amount of the coverage of the policy. So that went through that. So the plaintiff had both the seller's insurance and our liability insurance to cover that. Or you would have that from that standpoint, if it's a property, you go to your own homeowner's insurance and see what kind of coverage you might have there.
Because they usually, homeowners has that.
Yeah, depending on what it is, depending on what the situation. Yeah, we've got this thing about floodplain, flood insurance coverage. Did we start talking about that the last class? I'm trying to remember. Did we go through this? Deal with a temporary lease. We go through this. I want to make sure that we do understand because it's silly. And we fully expect the next legislative session to create this exemption. When you look on, this is the second page of the temporary residential lease. And you'll notice in paragraph 41 and 22, we have exemptions under the property code. Chapter 92 of the landlord tenant property code, because it's a temporary residential lease. And so in a temporary residential lease, you have the same language in both the listing or the seller's lease back and the buyer. Buyer's temporary lease. Where there are exclusions, there are exemptions for both smoke alarms and security devices. So that the landlord, who is the seller, is the buyer on the property, doesn't have to do this for the seller, whereas the tenant. We think that same exclusion needs to be made for paragraph 23, because in temporary residential lease, the buyer, who is the landlord, is getting that information from the seller in the seller's disclosure notice.
They were getting it from the title company.
They get it from, they get it from the seller in the seller's disclosure notice. Yes. In the section of seller's disclosure notice, you have a whole section dealing with flood.
I agree, but the seller can, they can be out to lunch. I thought the title company was the definitive answer
Not
about.
for flood.
No, not for flood.
Title doesn't do anything to flood.
Okay, disclosed, you're telling me they don't.
There's no disclosure of the title company to deal with
For flood.
Yeah. So we're gonna get it from the seller, and the buyer is relying on that information. Now, the buyer still is responsible for disclosing to the seller as the landlord what their information is on floodplain. But buyer saying, I'm not aware of anything, here's what the seller gave me, and maybe they gave me nothing. Here's the deal. Even if the seller is exempt from seller disclosure notice, buyer still has to complete this, still has to give this to the tenant who's the seller. We think it's nuts.
Something behind this that came up now.
Pardon me?
Is something behind this that made it.
The legislature was asleep on this. They had already created exemptions in paragraph 21 and 22 for temporary leases. They just missed, when paragraph 23 was put here, they missed it, said, oh, that's silly, we shouldn't have that. We think they will change it. We think it'll get taken out. But right now it's there. So when you've got the buyer, you're writing an offer and there's going to be a temporary residential lease, this notice has to be given.
But the whole addendum regarding rental flood came about because of everything we've had happen between Harvey and all that kind
Oh,
of
yeah,
stuff.
that part is true.
Well, they gave
But
that.
this specifically addresses temporary residential leases. And that shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be required. But the whole other floodplain thing, that's why we got a whole new section in the seller disclosure notice addressing and dealing with that. What you've got here is the Texas Realtor 2015. Trek has a form they've come out with a notice that's 54-0. This is one that's in DocuSign and Loop and is already there in zip forms. I don't know that the 54-0 is on that yet or not. This is an easy one. If you're writing an offer, temporary residential lease, you got to include this.
Does this have anything to do with 12-month leases?
About what?
Non-purchase leases, temporary leases, like what I do, leasing.
Yes, you do. You have to.
Okay, anyway, it's okay, stop. Okay, clarify what you mean.
Well, I thought you were describing where the buyer and seller have a temporary lease after closing.
He was.
Which is this lease form here. So the seller is on a lease property, seller temporary residential lease where they remain in the property past closing.
Got it. What I'm asking is a normal long-term lease. If you're longer, do I have to provide flood
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's what this one's for, and that's.
Well, yeah, and so the addendum regarding rental flood disclosure, you have to use that in every lease. Short term or long term. And unfortunately, at this point in time, even with a temporary residential lease. I do that in all of those, as you work through. Question on that, question on any of this? In some ways, the advertising situation is one of the least exciting things to you right up until the complaint hits.
What happens when the complaint is?
You come into my office.
And you cry.
That brings a case of.
And I say, Larry, you were in the class. You've got the paperwork, you've got the form. Heck, are you doing?
And you're married to Marcia.
You do.
Let's just really ask.
So what actually happens?
This is him on very capable.
Okay, so what happens is, you'll receive a letter from Trek. And it'll request certain information within a 14-day time frame. Mike will receive a letter from Trek. And Mike will carefully put it in my folder and say, I'll take care of it. Because I've answered these questions before on the other side, I know exactly what we're gonna say. So we go through that process, the Trek investigator will set up a telephone conference with you and have you explain why you're incompetent and disrespectful and chose not to follow any of the rules. And you'll say, well, frankly, I was really receptive to doing it, but I was talking to a wife, who's the assistant risk manager in our office, and she said, oh, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal. So I just figured, well, I'm not going to argue with my wife about that. So that's how it ended up happening. Then they'll ask for her number. So she'll get included in the tracker.
Now, the Trek just interested in educating and ceasing to do it right.
Okay, so
Are there fines that come down?
here's the follow-up concept to that question. We have worked, we as realtors, especially those of us who are pretty involved with Trek, have worked really hard on the concept. And I've said this in every Trek meeting that I've been in. I says, okay, and the last one I was in, or responsibility, Mike Malloy, who's the director of enforcement and attorney, I said, here's what I need to know that how you think about this. Enforcement through education. We don't know all these rules. We don't know how this is. Even this stuff, there are gray areas in there. I was in a Trek meeting and I had a question on one of the rules. And happened in that meeting that one of the senior Trek enforcement investigators was there. And I said, hey, here's my question. She said, whoa, wait a minute. Harry Lewis, who was the general counsel at the time, was in that meeting. And let me ask Harry. I said, whoa. You're telling me that you don't have an answer to a question and you're expecting us out in the field to know what this means? That's not right. I mean, you've got to educate us. We're happy to comply. We should know what the heck you mean. One of the really terrible F words that Trek uses, a 4-letter F word, fair. I don't know what they mean by fair. I don't know where the bar is with them. I said, we're happy to comply and we don't know what it means. And it's a little bit of a challenge. But we do believe it's certainly beginning with our last hierarchy of the Trek chair and so forth. We think they're moving more and more in the direction of education and not just holding everybody responsible. I can't believe you didn't know that because, many times when you call Trek to get some good advice, even one of the leaders, they'll do is quote you the rule. So, I can read the rule. What you do is explain to me what it means. And that's a challenge, as hard as I work with this stuff, there's so much stuff in there. I go, man, I don't even know what that means. Let's talk about it. Unfortunately, I can make a request and we can talk and work through the process because I know them and they know me. And it's generally they'll respond to me. And sometimes I say, oh my gosh, Bob, what are we gonna do about that? But yeah, it is a challenge because, we try. And the concept is we're trying to make sure, and it's what we're doing in the broker responsibility working group. We're trying to make rules so the good brokers who are trying to do it right, can do it right. We can't fix the others. We can't fix the stupid corruptions. It's just, it is what it is. And little by little, eventually they'll be gone because it creates an environment that's so uncomfortable and so costly that they just don't do it. Because, you know, one of the things that they learn is that when Trek enforces something, the administrative fines they can charge can be 6 figures. All of a sudden, when you've got a fine for 120,000, it kind of catches your attention. And plus then they take your license. So it's a big deal. Track complaints are a big deal. Because we could be out of business. Lawsuits, that's just money. And mostly it's your money. That's just money. Good, that's a good point. Any questions, Zoomers? You've been really, really quiet. James, you're just sitting there in front of your house and just relaxing. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well, Bob. Learning a lot today.
Me too. Me too. I got some good questions here, working through it. This is a tough little subject as we kind of work through this. Denise, you have anything that you want to throw out? We good? Everybody good? Guys, any more questions? Yes, ma'am. Question?
Is there a chat thing?
Yeah, but he doesn't know how to.
I don't know how to.
Oh,
I have no idea. You've got to check something here, unmute yourself and ask the question.
So
I have no idea how to do that.
see an advertising violation, bring it to you.
Sure, bring it to me and schedule. We try to call the other broker and say, you know, we saw this, doesn't seem to be right. A lot of grief from my agents who say, well, how come they can do that and we can't do that? This is.
Thank you, Bob. Your chat.
Oh, thank you, Bob. Okay. I got a call from another KW broker recently about the lease and about the floodplain notice. And he said, I have one of your agents tell one of my agents in transaction that you said we have to use this. He said, where's this coming from? And I explained it to him. I said, oh man, I missed that. I said, well, I originally did too, by the way. I missed it, and we had that same thing happen with another. Said, well, Bob, you guys have to do that. So, okay. We had a conversation. But it was good to know that we had understanding of a requirement that even another good KW, and this is one of the better KW offices, that they didn't know about, that they didn't have yet. So I felt good about it. We were kind of a little bit ahead of the game as you work through that. So it was a good thing. But thank everybody for being here. Everybody know how to turn off the Zoom so they can't hear what we're getting ready to talk about. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I just sign up for the Boo Bash. Have it next week.
And Burger Fridays this Friday, guys.
What's this Friday?
Burger
Oh.
Fridays this Friday.
Here
Blue Bash
for
is
Friday.
next Thursday.
Bring money to celebrate the AHA Fund.
So I have this, I have a